One of the things we find in leadership is that very often we are so busy doing the work of service that we don't take time out to celebrate the work that's being done, to encourage ourselves and each other. And so one of the goals of the President's Interfaith and Community Service Campus Challenge is to celebrate the good work that's being done on campuses across America. Many of you were engaged in this work before the challenge even came about. But now we're hoping that you're able to attract more people to the work, that you're feeling supported in the work, and that you're seeing the value of knowing other schools that are doing similar things that you can partner with even across the internet, even across the text messages, even across the emails and the webinars that we have. We're trying to build community and model what we hope other communities will do. And so we want to thank you for taking time to be a part of this. It is all about relationships. And if you never talk or interact with someone who's different than you are, you really are missing out on a great opportunity to experience and appreciate the diversity, the richness of our global society. The very fact that you're here lets us know that you're already on that path, and we're excited to be on that path with you, to learn from you these next couple of days what you're doing and help strengthen that work as we go forward. Because President Obama's vision was that by working together on common concerns, that we would build bridges of understanding, that we would meet people that we might not ordinarily have met, and that we would see that we all have some common values around what's important in terms of being a part of the larger society. So I want to thank you for being here. We're going to have a selection to kind of get the juices going by members of the gospel choir of Georgetown University. And then I will come back and tell you what's going to happen next. But even as they come, I think they're somewhere near, they're there. Even as the choir comes, you know these students are coming out of class and everything to come here and be a part of this, so make them feel like we appreciate the time they're investing. Members of the Georgetown University Gospel Choir.
treasure of heaven, crucified. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the
Let's celebrate them one more time for joining in our celebration. Members of the Georgetown Gospel Choir. Georgetown University has just been such a gracious and generous partner as we planned for this year's celebration. And so thank you. Those are two really simple words, but President DeJoy, you're going to hear us say them over and over and over again. This has just been an awesome experience in partnership, awesome in relationship building, and awesome in demonstrating that we're on the same path of trying to connect people's hearts and minds to do work that makes our nation, our world, a better place. And so as we proceed into our program now, and I am delighted to introduce to many of you and present to others the new director, special assistant and Executive Director of the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. She comes to us having served as the Director for the Center for Religion and Public Affairs at Wake Forest University, as a non-resident fellow at Brookings Institute, as a casebook author, as an expert on First Amendment freedoms, as the past General Counsel for the Baptist Joint Committee. Her gifts are many, and she's using them all in this job. And if you all ask her really nicely while you're here, she may actually lead a webinar or training program for us in next year's efforts around the Interfaith service so that you can ask her questions about the legal aspects of working together across our faith lines. I am excited and delighted to present to you Melissa Rogers, who will guide us through the next parts of our program. Won't you make her feel really welcome in this place?
Good morning. Thank you for that kind introduction. President DeGioia and Georgetown faculty and students, other college and university presidents, administrators, and students, and other distinguished guests. I am honored to bring you greetings from our President, Barack Obama. We are so glad to be here with you and to welcome you to the kickoff for the third year of the President's Interfaith and Community Service Campus Challenge. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. And before I go any farther, I just want to thank all of those who have made this event possible. First, I'd like to ask Brenda and her team at DOE to please stand. I'd also like for Ibu Patel and his team to stand. And I'd like for President DeGioia and other members of the faculty and staff and students who have helped to bring the gathering, if you would please stand. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done to bring this gathering together today. We know that it doesn't just happen. It takes a lot of work year-round, and we're grateful to you. Well, years ago, I had the great honor of serving with Ibu Patel on the President Barack Obama's first advisory council for faith-based and neighborhood partnerships. And that body, as some of you may know, is charged with making recommendations to the administration for strengthening the partnerships that it forms with community groups, both faith-based and secular, to serve people in need. And Ibu and others on the council have been doing a lot of work with colleges and universities that were already engaged in interfaith community service and interfaith dialogue. And at that time, Ibu proposed to us that the Advisory Council recommend to the administration that these programs be brought to a whole new level of influence, and that engagement be assisted by the administration and the White House office, as well as the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships at the Department of Education. Well, I don't think it's any surprise that President Barack Obama thought that was a great idea. As you all know, the president has been engaged in community service all of his life in one form or another, got some of his early professional training as a community organizer for a Christian organization. And so he readily took to that recommendation and launched what has become the Interfaith Community Service Campus Challenge. And we're happy to report that this idea has really taken off. 270 institutions of higher learning participated in this effort the first year. 95 new institutions joined us the next year, and even more organizations and institutions and students have joined us this year and will continue to join over the period of this academic year. And you know, as I do, that this idea is very simple, but also very powerful. It is the idea of creating opportunities for community service for students, faculty, and administrators of all faiths and none, and coupling that with dialogue across religious lines to build better understanding. This is, again, a simple but yet powerful idea, and it is made much more powerful by your investment in it. And in fact, we think that it is expanding and becoming even more nuanced and having more purchase over the years because of the energy and ideas that you bring to it each year. Well, another thing that we're very excited about is that universities and colleges are increasingly adopting these practices as part of their structure so that it will endure for years to come. And we're very grateful for that. So let me just close by saying that the White House is very proud of this effort and what it says about our country. It is a symbol of some of the very best of our country, providing service, building bridges of understanding, and working with rising generations so that these traditions are both preserved and translated for years to come. So thank you. It's my privilege now to introduce the next speaker, President Jack DeGioia, the 48th president of Georgetown University. Under his leadership, the university has scaled new heights in so many ways. It has expanded its facilities and has increased student financial aid and strengthened endowments. President DeGioia has placed special emphasis on strengthening Georgetown's Catholic and Jesuit identity and its responsibility to serve as a voice and an instrument for justice. He has helped expand and deepen Georgetown's engagement with the global community, support initiatives on a range of issues involving interreligious dialogue, and he has also enhanced Georgetown's relationship with many political, cultural, corporate, and economic resources in Washington. And I can't tell you how grateful the White House is to have his partnership in this endeavor and to be able to tap his wisdom and his leadership on these issues in particular. We couldn't be at a better place to celebrate the kickoff of the third Interfaith Campus Service Challenge, and so I welcome the president to the podium now.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for those very kind words and for your leadership in bringing us all together in support of the President's Interfaith and Community Service Challenge. It's a privilege for Georgetown to be able to host this important gathering. And I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Georgetown University. It's an honor to have this opportunity to bring together this group of leaders to reflect on the role that colleges and universities play in promoting service and interfaith understanding to address the pressing issues facing our communities. I wish to thank all of our special guests who have joined us today, including Martha Cantor, Undersecretary at the Department of Education, and Ibu Patel, the founder and president of the Interfaith Youth Corps. Ibu, it's always a pleasure to have you here at Georgetown. I look forward to hearing your remarks later in the program. I'd also like to express my gratitude to the members of our Georgetown community who have been essential to our efforts in this challenge. Tom Banshoff and Melody Fox Ahmed at our Berkley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs, Father Kevin O'Brien and Lisa Panucci of Campus Ministry, and Andrea Whistler and Ray Hsu of our Center for Social Justice, Teaching, and Service. I'm grateful to each of them and all of their colleagues for their leadership and commitment to social justice, community service, and interfaith dialogue. We're all here today because we share a deep commitment to building understanding between different communities and contributing to the common good, the express purpose of the challenge that we have all answered. The idea of the common good unites each of us, unites us across faiths, across traditions, across borders. It unites us in the work we do in our communities, in our work to try to improve the world that we share. We come to this from different faiths, different traditions, but we come together and converge in this common pursuit. At Georgetown, our commitment to the common good is at the core of our mission as a university and finds its roots in our Catholic and Jesuit tradition. In fact, it can be found in the Jesuit order's founding document, which was approved by Pope Paul III exactly 473 years ago tomorrow. And the document known as the Formula of the Institute, St. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, wrote this: "The society," meaning the Jesuit order, "the society should show itself no less useful in reconciling the estranged, in holily assisting and serving those who are found in prisons or hospitals, and indeed in performing any other works of charity according to what will seem expedient for the glory of God and the common good." This commitment, this guiding principle, is at the heart of what we try to do here, of how we seek to use our resources as a community to engage in the world. We also come to this work by virtue of our academic mission, a mission which each of us in this room shares as women and men dedicated to higher education. Colleges and universities have a responsibility in our world to the common good. We are seen as the greatest instrument for social mobility in our country. We have a public responsibility to prepare our workforce, engage in local community development, leverage our resources, and the pursuit of social justice. And at our core, we are committed to dialogue, committed to engagement with one another. Together as communities of teachers and learners, we come together to work through our questions, our challenges, and our disagreements. In this work, we acknowledge that there is a truth to be discovered, a good to be realized together. This discovery, this realization occurs in dialogue with one another, and especially with those who share a different faith, a different background. It occurs in our classrooms, in our laboratories, in our residence halls, throughout our communities, and through the connections we make serving others. By participating in this challenge, we affirm our commitment to seeking the common good through service. Working together, we may come to see our challenges differently, and by sharing our unique insights and experiences, we may even be able to identify new solutions to the kinds of issues that we will have the opportunity to hear about and to discuss over the course of these next 2 days. Issues like increasing economic opportunity, protecting our environment, ending human trafficking. This is the work that, by participating in the President's Interfaith Community Service Challenge, we seek to advance in service to our communities, to each other, to our world, and to the common good. It is a great privilege for us here at Georgetown to welcome you here and to have this opportunity to engage with you in this discourse over the course of these next 2 days. I'm greatly honored to have this opportunity to welcome you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Next, we are pleased to be able to hear from our colleague, Dr. Martha Cantor, who serves as Undersecretary for the United States Department of Education. Martha oversees a wealth of initiatives at the Department of Education, including policies and programs related to post-secondary education, adult and career education, federal student aid, and 6 White House initiatives, including this initiative. She has been an incredible friend to the Interfaith Service Campus Challenge, and we're so grateful for her leadership and her wisdom and her time and talent that's all devoted to leadership in the Obama administration and in this specific effort. Thank you, Martha.
I'm delighted to be here, and I want to thank each of you for coming. This is a very important convening. And so on behalf of President Obama and Secretary Duncan, who's my boss, I'd like to congratulate all of you that represent institutions that are working exactly on interfaith dialogue through the partnership that has brought us together. It's the interfaith community service work that brought you here to Georgetown and has helped many of you really propel what is so important on, in my view, every one of our 7,500 colleges and universities in the country. So I want to commend those of you who are the pioneers, the several hundred institutions that now are celebrating this year, the third year of this effort. And our goal is really to help support your reaching out across your regions, your communities, your states, the country, to get more leaders working in this space. We talked at lunch, thank you, President DeGioia, for bringing a smaller group of us together to talk about going forward and what are the best ways we can do that together that each of us in our silos might not be able to do alone. So in the few minutes I have with you, and they'll keep track of the time, I just want to take us back a little bit to 2009 when I came to Washington from California. And I heard the president on April 24th talk about, and it's a phrase I've carried with me for 4.5 years, what would it take by 2020 to have the best educated, most competitive workforce in the world? And we heard at the lunch today that higher education is the envy of countries around the world. This is where people are coming to learn about how we do things. And so I think it's critically important that religious dialogue becomes a central part of the kinds of things that happen in a university to engage in preparing the leaders of the future. And those leaders may well be across the world, 7, 10, 20,000 miles away, and they may be right here at home. The president has framed this goal, which we call the 2020 goal, Secretary Duncan calls it our North Star, in terms of 4 elements. And so when I step back and I think about the value of higher education, and I think about these 4 cornerstones, I think, what does it take to get the interaction to make the parts greater than the whole? And what does it take, certainly in the federal government, to, on the one hand, reduce burden? And my word is simplification. And if there's any book you ought to read, Simpler. I love this book because it's a very elegant book about how can we do things together to, on the one hand, simplify, and on the other hand, be crystal clear about what we want this country to become. What kinds of people we will be educating that are going to become the global citizens that our country needs so desperately, that our world needs. And we produced back in 2012 a report. We had 125 scholars. Thank you, Georgetown, once again, for contributing to this work. A work that's on the web. It's an open book. If those of you in the tech field know what an open book is, you can just go to it and read it. It's called The Crucible Moment. And it really tried to frame in the larger context the civic imperative for people coming together to think about service for the public good, as Dr. DeGioia just spoke about. And so this report had recommendations to higher education, to K-12, to the business community, to philanthropy, to any number of stakeholders that want us to be the best we can be as a nation. And so that work caused us to create 9 steps to action. And one of those steps is to, and this is where we'd love your help, to help us think about if the president, as he did in Buffalo, New York a couple weeks ago, talked about a system to compare colleges and universities to help students and families get the best value that they can get. And there's a lot of worry, nationally about, is the middle class getting priced out of college? Is it too expensive? What about the quality of our institutions? And for me, when I step back from all of it as your undersecretary and I think about, how do we frame the value conversation that emphasizes the public good of our institutions, whether they're private, not-for-profit, nonprofit, for-profit, or a community college or a research university like Georgetown, with the diversity of American higher education, How do we frame the value for students and families and communities and the nation, quite frankly, that will shape who comes from our institutions and what they will do next? How do we shape leaders for this nation? How do we shape the workers? And how do we work together in designing a system that brings us far better to a place that's far better than where we've been? And so there's a lot of worry in the country about the middle class. And there's a lot of worry you'll read in the newspapers pretty much every day about the student loan program. You probably won't read about things that American higher education has done as much. In the first term, just in 2.5 years, we actually increased by 50% the number of low-income students with Pell Grants in college. So we had 6 million when I started. We have almost 10 million today. I didn't do that. You all did that. You brought those students here. On the policy side, yes, we added $900 to the Pell Grant over that period of time, and that helped a great deal. But for the students to enter the doors of your institutions, you opened them and you gave them what they needed. You gave them the value that they were looking for. So in my view, you were doing the most important work of the nation. And I think it's very important that we frame the economic conversation, which we've had in the first term, with the social conversation, with the public good conversation, with the justice conversation, and ultimately, as we did in the Crucible moment, talk about the future of our democracy in that context. Because that is why all of you have chosen higher education to become the leaders of the next generation and the next and the next. And we have to, in simple terms, get us to a much more nuanced conversation, as we said at lunch. We need to look at the public good of American higher education in this context and keep college affordable, get better and better with what we know and can do, and exemplify the excellence of American higher education in the graduates who come from our institutions and what they do next. So it's been a tremendous opportunity for me to work with the team here. I think you've done a fantastic job in this conference bringing us all together. And we are launching a major outreach campaign that already started on Thursday with student leaders from around the country to talk about the value and affordability of American higher education and how that can inform what the president has proposed going forward for the second term. So I open the doors. We want your ideas. We hope that you will come to the conversations and the convenings that we'll have around the country in the next few months. Write, speak together about the public good and about the work of the interfaith dialogue. I think Ibu Patel will talk about interfaith collaboration and the ecology of all of this, and that's very exciting to me to have a framework for what you do that is so tremendously important for the future of our country and our democracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Martha, and thank you for the great work that you do. It's now my pleasure to introduce a wonderful colleague from the White House, a great friend, and a terrific leader on religious issues, interreligious dialogue, and discussions across difficult matters, including about matters of faith and how we deal with and build a pluralistic America. My colleague is Paul Montero. He's Public Engagement Advisor for Religion Affairs for the White House Office of Public Engagement, and please join me in welcoming him.
Well, good afternoon. Well, you can see how the 4.5 years at the White House has aged me. I think some of you look older than I do, but I hope it doesn't bother you too much. To President DeGioia, thank you very much for having us here at Georgetown. Melissa, thank you very much for organizing this conference. Ibu Patel, wonderful to see you again. To Undersecretary Cantor and Reverend Brenda Girton-Mitchell. And Brother Michael, thank you for putting this all together. I just wanted to talk briefly about some of the work we've been able to do. I've had the blessing of working for the president since he was in the Senate in 2006. Where he was one of the only senators who had people in his office reaching out to faith communities across their state. So across the state of Illinois, that's what we were doing, reaching out to pastors, rabbis, imams, any people of faith that wanted to be involved in the public square, and having tough conversations about issues that often divide people. And we've been able to continue that work in the White House. In the Office of Public Engagement, we call ourselves the front door of the White House. So if you want to come in the front door and have tea with us or punch us in the face, our job is to make sure that door is open. And so sometimes people miss that we want to talk to everyone, whether they agree with us or not. And in my role, I've also had the blessing of being able to work with outreach to different religious communities and the Arab American community. And obviously, over the last 2.5 years, you've seen with the historic shifts occurring in the Middle East, we've had no shortage of concerned Libyan Americans, concerned Syrian Americans, Egyptian Americans, Lebanese Americans coming to work with the federal government on concerns they have with the rights of religious minorities in that part of the world. And we've had some tough meetings with the head of the Coptic Church in the United States over what's happening to Christians in Egypt right now, what's happening to Christians in Syria right now. Just this weekend, you've seen with the Al-Shabaab activity in Kenya, how sometimes people misappropriate or distort religion to pursue all sorts of violent ends, killing people in the process to advance their political agenda. And before we, settle back in our seats and feel, very comfortable about the way we've been able to coexist as a pluralistic religious society here in the United States, and thank God to live in a country that is able to have such a diversity of religious views, or folks that have no religion at all coexisting with one another in general, you do see from time to time, as Imam Hendi can tell you, violence against Muslims or those perceived to be Muslim. Just this weekend, there was an attack against a Sikh gentleman, a professor, because he was perceived to be Muslim. Completely separate religion, who was beaten because of who they thought he was. The violence we've seen against Christians in certain part of the country, the violence we've seen against Sikhs and Hindus, folks who are otherized and seen as different and not being a part of our American family. We certainly have our issues here in the United States, and there's one issue that I wanted to raise briefly in my short time with you that has generated a lot of heat and not much light. And in a room full of bridge builders who are looking to come together, I think, around what I call the universal language of service. I mean, some people say music's the universal language. I would say, in the work that I've done to see, whether it's in Syria or Egypt or Lebanon or all across this country, when you serve your neighbor, whether it's through feeding them or sheltering them or clothing them or taking care of them when they're sick or in prison, that seems to build a bridge that very few speeches or photo ops or events can do. So I wanted to raise the issue of the Affordable Care Act because we're only a little more than a week away from the state exchanges going online, October 1st. And I wanted to talk to you, obviously in a room full of young people because of the numbers. 38% of the eligible population under the Affordable Care Act are young people between 18 and 35. How many of you currently have health insurance, just by a show of hands? Most people, that's great. Now, there's an awful lot of young people who don't have the privilege of being in school, and those are the folks we have to get to as well. But that's why I wanted to talk to you, because young people that are in your networks, maybe in school or around the country and simply friends of yours, these exchanges work when we have young people in it. If young people don't enroll in the exchanges, what's going to happen is folks who are older, more dependent, have more health challenges, seniors, they will be the only ones enrolling. And for the system to work, it has to be balanced out by a healthy and young population. Most of those populations we found are in the states of California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. But really, young people in every state signing up for the Affordable Care Act is an imperative. And we've just seen in a report last week, 6 out of 10 Americans will be able to, compare healthcare plans, like comparing a flight to Washington, D.C., like on kayak.com. You'll be able to go online to healthcare.gov, and based on your state, compare health plans between one provider or another, where in many states, you only had one provider to choose from before this point. A lot of young folks may feel that they don't need health insurance, but for less than $100, 6 out of 10 of all eligible Americans will pay less than $100 a month for quality health insurance, less than your cell phone bill probably, that will have at least a floor beneath you if you have, God forbid, an accident, because of some choice you made or an accident due to the negligence of another person. But we want to make sure that young people are taking advantage of the Affordable Care Act starting October 1st. It's a 6-month enrollment window, so it runs through the end of March. It's not a single day in October, but you have to enroll by December 15th of this year to be eligible for this year's coverage. Otherwise, you'll have to wait until the next year. But I wanted to talk about the Affordable Care Act in the minute I have left, because as I said before, this is an issue that's generated a lot of heat and not a lot of light. And wherever you are in terms of your understanding of the Affordable Care Act, I ask that you work with our team that's here. Acacia Salati from HHS will be here throughout the conference. I think there's a working session. Ask questions about it. There are people of goodwill on both sides of this that have deep opinions about what the Affordable Care Act means to every American. But ask questions about how this impacts you and how it impacts your neighbor. And President DeGioia talking about the importance of working towards the common good. Healthcare is very personal to the president in achieving benefits for the common good, because from a personal level, he spent many months watching his mother suffer in the hospital the last months of her life, fighting with her insurance company because they said her cancer was a pre-existing condition. And fighting for a healthcare system that says you can't be kept out of health coverage because you had a pre-existing condition. You can't be targeted because of your zip code. You can't be arbitrarily raised on rates because of the whims of an insurance company's bottom line. Talking about the morality of leaving tens of millions of people without the health care coverage that we can provide if we had the political will to do so. So thank you very much for having me, and I hope you have a wonderful conference. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I'm pleased to introduce a student here at Georgetown University, Noreen Sajwani. She is a junior here and majoring in healthcare management and policy. And she is chair, as I understand, of the Interfaith Student Association and has been very active in interfaith service work and interfaith dialogue for years. So let me call to the podium Noreen Sajwani, who will in turn introduce our friend Ibu Patel.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the opening plenary session for the 3rd Annual President's Interfaith and Community Service Campus Challenge. My name is Noreen Sajwani, and today I have the privilege of introducing our guest speaker, Mr. Ibu Patel. As the founder and executive director of the Interfaith Youth Corps, IFYC, a Chicago-based nonprofit promoting interfaith cooperation, Mr. Patel has broadly extended his scope of interfaith work over the years, and now serves as a member of President Obama's Advisory Council of the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Aside from these incredible accomplishments, Mr. Patel has been a personal inspiration in my life since I last heard him speak at an IFYC conference this summer in New York City. As the newly elected chair of the Interfaith Student Association at Georgetown, I was both excited and nervous for the work to be done at an institution that values interreligious dialogue so highly. Realizing that I had big shoes to fill, I embarked on IFYC with the hope of learning how to best bring interreligious efforts into the daily lives of Georgetown students, regardless of their previous knowledge on the issue. The first night of the conference, I still remember going up to Mr. Patel prior to the opening dinner to ask him how his role as a Shia Ismaili Muslim ignited his passion for the interfaith work he does today. Coming from the same religious tradition as Mr. Patel, I figured his response would be helpful in figuring out how to approach interfaith dialogue from my personal perspective. However, his simple yet powerful response remained very general and open to interpretation for any individual. He said, "It's all about service to the community. You see service everywhere, in our personal lives as Ismaili Muslims, but also as people of faith and of non-faith. This is what unites us all. It is service and doing good for others because we wish to do good for the world at large." These words have carried on with me since then, and I am fortunate to have had the opportunity to successfully begin facilitating numerous interreligious dialogues and events at Georgetown, thanks to Mr. Patel's inspiring words. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Ibu Patel.
Thank you. Noreen, I need you to follow me around everywhere and make me sound smarter than I actually am. Actually, I'm hoping that all of you can take on that role, that whatever I say right now, you will go off, and wherever you might repeat some of the words, make them twice as good as I actually say them, because I think that that's what Noreen just did. So I appreciate that from you. So I have to say, one of the most memorable days in my life was early in 2009. It was the first formal meeting of the Faith Council. It took place in the Oval Office, and President Obama got down to business right away. He said, listen, I want this council to focus on 4 big things. Number one, at a time of deep economic stress in America and around the world, we have to have our faith and moral communities involved in service. Number 2, you ought to be doing that service together. Number 3, we have to lift that example up for the world to see so that the idea of religious conflict does not become inevitable in the public imagination. The notion of service across different faith lines becomes a possibility. And finally, he said, I think young people ought to lead the way. And I'll never forget, one of my mentors and friends, Jim Wallace, is standing next to me, and he kind of elbows me in the ribs. Jim is faculty here at Georgetown and a well-known author and Christian figure in America. And he says, I think the president is talking about what those college campuses you work with have been doing for many, many years. I was walking out, and I spoke with Director Joshua Dubois of the Faith Office. He was the person in Melissa's job before she held it. And I said, Joshua, did you put that in the president's talking points? And he said, I have no idea where it came from. And I thought about that. Right? Here he was, probably day 35 of his presidency, and he was already off message. That's what his staff must have been thinking. But actually what he was doing was he was speaking from his heart. And if you go back to his first book, Dreams from My Father, I think you'll find the source of why President Obama asked his Faith Council to focus on that at that first meeting. In his years in Chicago, when he was in his early 20s, not much older than the vast majority of students in this room, President Obama was an interfaith leader. We talk about him as being a community organizer, and that's one cut at it. But who was he organizing? Who was he working with? Protestant churches, Catholic parishes, Muslim groups. His mentor was a Jew. President Obama, before the term ever came into currency, was somebody who recognized the power of building bridges between people who orient around religion differently. What was he doing with those bridges? He was starting tutoring centers. He was starting job training centers. And when he became president, he brought that formative experience with him into the Oval Office and thought to himself, America has become the most religiously diverse country, maybe in human history, the most religiously devout nation in the West at a time of global religious conflict. Either we forfeit the territory to those who would make a faith a bridge, a bubble, or a bomb, or a barrier, or we give a generation of young people the same opportunities that he had when he was young, the opportunities to be interfaith leaders. Listen, the last 15 years that I've been in this movement, the single most common metaphor for bringing people across lines of religious difference together is the bridge. And probably the best idea I've had in 10 years, I didn't have to go to Oxford to get a PhD to know. I learned it in kindergarten, which is nothing but rain and snow falls from the sky. Bridges don't fall from the sky. Bridges don't rise from the ground. If we want the relationships between people who orient around religion differently to be defined by bridges and not bombs or barriers, we're going to have to build them. And what that means is we're going to have a critical mass of people who are interfaith bridge builders, who have the framework, the knowledge base, and the skill set to make sure that relationships between people who orient around religion differently don't become violence or conflict. They become increased social capital and strengthened social cohesion. You know, my favorite story about a bridge is actually not an architectural one, it's a literary one. It comes from Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities. And the conceit of that book is the great traveler Marco Polo goes around the empire of Kublai Khan. And he comes back to the king's court and he tells the emperor about all of the different places in his empire. And actually, all of those different places happen to be different cuts at the same city, Venice. And in one of these vignettes, Marco Polo is telling Kublai Khan about this bridge. And Kublai Khan cuts to the chase and says, I want to know about the stone that holds the bridge together. And Marco Polo says, the bridge isn't held together by a stone, it's held together by an arch. And Kublai Khan says, so why are you talking to me about stones then? Tell me about the arch. And Marco Polo says, but Your Highness, without stones, there is no arch. And I think about that when it comes to the intricacy of interfaith leadership, right? How do we place the stones in place such that a community of people who have different views on matters cosmic and political are willing to walk across that bridge from a place of conflict and tension to a place of understanding and cooperation? That's what we do. We place those stones, but even more importantly, we evoke them from the communities we work with. We ask them to bring their stones so that we can collectively put them in place and form a bridge. That is a powerful task. That is an intricate task. It is one that doesn't come easily. I have to tell you something. Barack Obama is not the first young person to have formative experiences of religious diversity and interfaith leadership in his student days or in his 20s. I think to myself that in the year 1950, there was a speech given in Philadelphia by a great African-American intellectual, Mordecai Johnson, who's the president of Howard University here in Washington, D.C. It was a speech on Christian love. And Mordecai Johnson uses as the exemplar of Christian love in that speech a man named Mahatma Gandhi, a Hindu from India. And in the back of that lecture hall, there was a student from the South, son of a Baptist minister, grandson of a Baptist minister, grown up in almost an entirely Baptist environment, went to Morehouse College and found himself at Grosier Theological Seminary. And I sometimes think to myself, what must have young Martin Luther King Jr. felt in his heart when his tradition was being represented by an exemplar from elsewhere? Well, King goes back to Crozier, and he says he buys a half dozen books on Gandhi, and he has books on Christianity in his left, Tillich and Niebuhr in the Bible, and books on Gandhi in his right, and he's reading across these two traditions, asking himself the question, how do we embody the best of both of these? How do we embody the idea of peaceful activity? How do we embody the idea of social action that brings communities together? Martin Luther King Jr. was 20 years old. When Jane Addams had her initial visions for Hull House, she called it Cathedral of Humanity. She was in her early 20s. When she puts it into place, she's 28 years old. King, when he leads the boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, is 26 years old. Barack Obama is not the first who has the ideas and experiences of interfaith leadership in his formative years. And looking at this room, he is far from the last. One of the special things about this President's Interfaith Challenge convening is about a quarter of the people in this room are students, which basically means the White House is complicit in helping you guys bunk class for 2 days. So, Melissa, congratulations on that. What does it mean for you to acquire the framework, the knowledge base, the skill set of interfaith leadership, the ability to put those stones into place so that people experiencing conflict and tension can walk across the bridge to understanding and cooperation? That's what these 2 days are about. The agenda is spectacular. It's an opportunity to build technical expertise on particular interfaith service areas. It's an opportunity to broaden the network of folks doing this. I go to campuses all across the country, wonderful places like the University of Laverne in Los Angeles. I was just at Alvernia in Pennsylvania. And one of the things I hear is, are we the only ones doing this? And I'm like, no, you guys are on the vanguard, the first pack, but you're going to be so inspired when you meet each other. Well, these 2 days, you're going to meet each other. You're going to hear about the interfaith service projects that are happening all across the country. And I want you to imagine a nation that is different in 30 years for this work. What will America look like when interfaith cooperation becomes a social norm? What will America look like when interfaith leader, just like social entrepreneur, just like civil rights worker, just like human rights activist, becomes part of the common currency? Being first is not easy, but somebody's got to do it, and somehow we got chosen. Here's the role of Interfaith Youth Corps and our terrific partners in the Department of Ed on this. Our job is to help support your work. It is our great privilege in being part of the launch of this, but I'll tell you something. You don't build things just by launching them. You build things by painstakingly supporting them over and over again. We have about a dozen staff here who are here to meet with you and help you make sure that your work is where you want it to be. We are hosting a reception this evening. We have a special guest at that reception who's going to be doing a reading from his play about Abraham Joshua Heschel and Cardinal Bea. It's one of the great interfaith moments in American history. Colin Greer is going to be with us, so please come to that reception from 5:30 to 6:30 this evening. I want to close with 2 quick stories. Number 1, this is called the President's Interfaith Challenge. And one of the things that inspires me the most is that our presidents from the beginning have recognized the importance of engaging religious diversity positively. So when George Washington gets a letter from Moses Sessions, the leader of the Hebrew congregation of Newport, Rhode Island, and Sessions is basically saying, how will my people fare in this new nation, knowing that we've been hated and hounded and harassed for centuries elsewhere? George Washington sends back a letter early in his term that says, the government of America will give to bigotry no sanction and to persecution no assistance. But the highest office in this land isn't president. The highest office is citizen. It's what we do on our campuses, in our communities, that makes the biggest difference. I hear over and over again from my friends who are government officials in DC, the best ideas lie outside of this city. I gotta tell you something. I go to 30 college campuses a year. I can assure them that they are right. The best ideas in America are on those college campuses, often bubbling in the heads of 19-year-olds, knowing that the American college campus is the single best place for an idea to come to reality. It's precisely because you have a whole set of people, faculty and administration and staff, whose job it is to help you make that idea real. Take advantage of it. Every time I'm on a college campus, especially in the fall, the primary emotion I feel is envy, right? To be 19 and on a college campus again, I would give an awful lot for that. My final story. We are at a great university. A Jesuit institution makes me think about Pope Francis and his just stunningly beautiful words and manner lately. An institution whose president, John Carroll, articulated a strong set of Jesuit values in the founding of this institution, and part of those values is that this institution would welcome people from all backgrounds. My father went to a Catholic university, Notre Dame University. It's why my family is in this country. I want to end with the story of what I learned from my dad at Notre Dame. I've been a diehard Fighting Irish fan since the beginning. It's what happened to my dad going to South Bend, Indiana in the mid-1970s. And my dad would take me on I-90 heading out of Chicago to Notre Dame for football games, but our first stop was always the Grotto, which is the shrine dedicated to the Virgin Mary. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, I would be standing with my dad before this shrine, and probably when I was 10 or 11, it suddenly occurred to me, I'm like, Dad, what the heck are we doing? We're Muslim, right? And my dad points at these flickering candles inside the grotto, and he says, the Quran says that God is like light upon light. He looks at me and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, always look for the resonances. I'll leave you with that message. In a world of deep religious difference, at a time when people make that difference violent conflict, our job as interfaith leaders is to always look for the resonance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibu. We appreciate your very eloquent remarks and the challenge that they present for all of us. I now want to recognize my colleague, Brenda Girton-Mitchell, and thank her for all her very great efforts to bring this conference together. She is our leader here, and we are grateful for her work.
And this is just the beginning, so I hope you're inspired, fired up, and ready to go as we deepen our work together on interfaith engagement. Thank Ibu for those inspiring remarks. I'm going to take him to my Baptist church one weekend. It'll work, it'll work.